Let's begin our tour of our Web API services. I'm going to sign in. If you want to try your free trial, just go ahead to the webapi.castiron.com and click on the free trial button and you'll get a 90-day free trial. I'm going to sign into the Web API services. Now that I'm signed in, I'm presented with a Getting Started screen where I can create APIs, I can socialize them on my developer portal, and manage those APIs. I'm going to begin by creating. To create a new API, simply type the name of the API, the context you want it to be accessed under, and a description of the API, and click the Create button. Let's take a look at our baggage status API. This is where we describe everything about our baggage status API. We can define new resources. These resources can be dynamic, and we give you an example here of how you can define your API, your resource to be dynamic and the parameters and so forth. Once you've defined it, you can go ahead and click the Add button. I already have two resources defined here. One is a basic proxy resource, where I can simply click that I want a proxy and manage an existing API resource. I can provide the parameter information, response bodies, the request and get headers, and this type of information not only can be used in the system, but it's also used for the documentation. Let's go back to our baggage status API and look at the other the other resource that we've defined. Now, this resource is it's not a proxy. We want to do something a little bit more complex. For example, let's say the API that I want to proxy isn't in the format that I want my consumers to consume the API in. So what I do is I define the response body that I want to consume the API in, and then I can go ahead and implement it. This allows you to assemble APIs very quickly from various different sources, from either DB2, MySQL, Oracle, or other HTTP services, which I have already done. And basically, what you do is you define, you set up for this HTTP one. I set up what I want, what service I want to call. I define and I configure. I drag and drop will take the response, because the response is what I want to change. I have the response that I get back from calling the service, and then I have the response that I want my API to produce. And you basically simply drag and drop and map the data. If you need to transform the data, there's a bunch of different configuration functions that you can use. And you can add and chain multiple of these things together to create a completely new and unique API. Let's go back and start each one of these services, because each one of these resources, excuse me. We'll activate that one, and we'll activate this one. Okay. After it's activated, I'm going to take a brief tour through the entitlements. Entitlements are what you allow your developers to subscribe to. You might have basic entitlements for when they're just trying out the API. You might have better entitlements for more advanced customers. You can add, you can require that the API requires just an ID, an app ID, or you might have it require an app ID and a secret. You might actually want to have it require an approval in order to get an app ID or a secret. There's a bunch of different ways you can put these entitlements, and you can limit the calls per minute that a particular entitlement can provide. Next, let's go ahead and test these resources. We provide a testing tool so you can test them right away. And we provide out of the box a test application, and you can also create your own applications to test as well. I would provide the secret if I have any parameters that I want, but this API I know doesn't require a parameter. I just click the test button and I can see the response. Now this is the response of the simple proxy API, and this is what we get back from calling that particular API that's been proxied. Now let's change to our status 2. This is where I decided I didn't like what the API originally returned, and I wanted to change the response. And so when I click that, you can see that the response has indeed changed, and I'm returning less values, and I've changed the name of some of the elements within there. You can also go and view metrics on your particular APIs and the resources of your API. For example, calls this month, the average response time of each call in that particular API. Now that we've defined, you can also add, before I leave this page, you can also define more documentation that you want the developers to know about this API, maybe tutorials, links to other helpful information, wikis, and so forth. The next thing I want to show you is the developer, how we can easily create a developer portal. We give you templates. This is all through configuration, not coding. We give you some templates that are available. You simply upload your images and your text. That's the hardest thing you have to do. We can hook into RSS feeds, hook up into Twitter. We can display featured apps that you want, that your developers have built and they want to have featured to spark innovation. You can also enter just text. You can change your themes. Here's the app page where you can see all of the apps that the developers want you to feature, and then you can simply select which apps you want to feature on your site. Now let's switch perspectives and become a developer. So what you're seeing now is what the developer would see. So here's that completed developer portal. So as a developer, I can quickly get a view of the RSS feeds, what's going on in Twitter, any new featured apps. I can quickly explore documentation. I can see my baggage status API, its 2 resources, and the entitlements that are allowed. I can then sign in or sign up if I'm not already a member. Once I've signed in, as a developer, I get a bunch of experiences as well. I can browse my APIs again, or I can view my I can register new apps, or I can manage my apps and see how well my apps are performing. But what we're going to do now is we're going to take a look at our baggage. You can see which 2 apps that I have available. I can click on entitlements. I can see out of all the APIs in this solution, I have 2 entitlements. One to the product API, it's a premium entitlement, and to the baggage status API. And I can change my entitlements to various different entitlements as well. I can go ahead and I can test my API really quickly as well. So I can select which resource I want to test. I'm going to test my status API, and I'm going to use my baggage claim app, and I'm going to send that request and response. Okay. Going back to my applications, I can quickly create a new application, and with that new application, when I click add, what it's going to prompt me with is my app key and secret, and this is the thing I use when I send requests to the API. And I can click register, and so now I have a new app. I can also go and view my dashboard. This is my app calls and statistics, and I can view it over a month or 7 days of how I've been using those APIs. I can see that my customer mobile app has had 15 calls. My baggage app has had 2 calls. I can see which APIs I've been invoking most, my top performing APIs. And then I can also see what clients were invoking this API. If it's a web, mobile, Android, iPhone, all of that type of information I can see through my dashboard. Now let's switch back to be the provider of the API. Just like the developer can see how their statistics are working, I, as the API owner, have my own dashboard, and I can view information and calls about, I can see my top calls, the APIs that are producing the most calls. You can see my product API has the most calls. I can see which type of clients were invoking this. I can see which developer is sending the most API requests. And I can see the top performing applications that have been sending API requests as well. I can even go down and do searches on business information. For example, I can search my product API and find out what products have been searched for over the past month. Let's check for iPads and see how many times iPads were searched for in the last month. So you can see a trend of when iPads were searched. Now let's see how many times somebody asked for a case for that iPad or any type of case. Well, that was quite high. Now let's see how many responses included the term computer. And you can search over any type of information that was in the request or the response. I'm just picking an element out of the product API, which is name. So you can really see, so you can see there's two results for a computer. So you have a lot of control over the business metadata that you have. Besides the dashboard, you can control the application developers as well. So I can see all my application developers, I can send them emails, I can block them from sending any more requests. I can see where they are in their quotas and how much they've called. And finally, I can see from an IT perspective, I can view all of the activity that has been occurring in my API management system. With that, that ends our quick tour of our Web API services. You can create, socialize, and manage your APIs with IBM Cast Iron Live Web APIs.